Hey, Patrick.
Hey, Michael J.
So, rubber hit the road. Dominaria, both cardboard and virtual tournament results are in, finally.
Yeah, and Dominaria is not joking around from the looks of it. The impact already felt across the format in basically every existing deck, as well as the many new decks that we've already seen so far with just a single weekend in the books.
I mean, where would you want to start? There's so many things to talk about. So
the SCG team event had a standard portion, and the champion, the champion team, the standard deck was piloted by Rudy Brixa, playing a blue-white control deck that, it seemed blue X control decks built around Torrential Gearhulk. Yeah, that's nothing too crazy, but two major advances for this color combination. I don't even want to call it the same archetype, but the addition of a format linchpin, not just a flagship, potentially a defining card of the format, Teferi Hero Dominaria, and then a few pieces of cheap interaction. What are your thoughts on this Teferi Hero of Dominaria deck, man? I mean, 3 copies.
Main deck, yeah. Rudy's deck, with 3 copies of Teferi Hero Dominaria, it's essentially transformed the archetype, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. Aside from a couple of Fumigates and 1 Search for Azcanta, everything in this deck is super fast. But Teferi, Planeswalker, played on your own turn, but it's kind of like it fake plays on your own turn, right? Because even if you tap on turn 5, you can tap 5, draw a card, and then immediately untap some lands so you can defend yourself with Negate, or I think as you were intimating, Seal Away, right?
Yeah, or even Blink of an Eye. Like, it can sound funny to just be, excited about the prospect of untapping 2 lands so that you can just burn a Blink of an Eye. But if that's the tempo you need so that you can get a full untap, that's excellent. If you spend your turn playing a Teferi and then you get to Blink of an Eye, even though you're down a card from Blink of an Eye, you're up a card from the extra card Teferi drew you. And now your opponent's turn was undone, and you just have a Teferi.
Oh, yeah, it's absolutely no big deal because the first part of that sequence was drawing that extra card. I mean, if you think about how this, kind of not even archetype, but family of archetypes has evolved over the course of the last year and a half, there were blue-white decks that killed with Torrential Gearhulk previous to the development of the Approach the Second Sun strategy, but an Approach kind of was the favored way for these kind of decks to win, and then they would often just sideboard Torrential Gearhulk or other creatures. But here we see, because Teferi is so good, this deck, Rudy's deck, is just no approaches, main deck or sideboard. In fact, it's just 4 Torrential Gearhulk's main deck, super emphasis on the instants, right? Or, instant type stuff, like Cast Out, Seal Away are not instants, but then there are so many actual instants, like you said, Blink of an Eye, Commit to Memory.
4 Settle the Wreckage, and 4 actual legit Glimmer of Genius, no couching it with Hieroglyphic Illumination. The combination of 4 Glimmer of Genius and 4 Settle the Wreckage makes for a really interesting turn 4, because it's hard for them to want to attack into your Settle the Wreckage mana, but then you can just use Glimmer to punish them.
Oh, yeah. I think this deck is going to be fun to tune. That's my intuition on it, because, these numbers are kind of unformed, right? I'm looking at that 1 Search for Azcanta. I'm based on the strength of Teferi here, do we really want the 1 Search for Azcanta? As you just said, there's no Hieroglyphic Illumination, no opt in this deck.
Well, I don't know. That's all the more reason to have it.
You think?
I don't know. I don't know, man. I was thinking, maybe I'm just old-fashioned, but do you really not want a second Search for Azcanta?
Well, they're so different. I actually want to have the 4th Essence Scatter, maybe up the negates, maybe play, I'm looking at those Blink of an Eye, do I want 2 Commit to Memories versus 3 or even 4 copies of Blink of an Eye?
See, that's the first thing my eye went to. I think that when you've got 4 Settle the Wreckage and 4 Glimmer of Genius, that's a lot of power, but you're really loading up on 4 drops that don't cycle for 1 mana or 2. And I think that when you've got 2 Cast Out, 2 Blink of an Eye, which ideally you want to play as a 4-drop, 2 Commit to Memory, that's like a lot of 4s. And I can't help but wonder about the possibility of maybe, I don't know, even if we have to sacrifice a little bit of power somewhere, maybe having just like a couple more cards that we can keep the card flow going if we draw too many of these 4s. Like, I don't know that I would hate a 3rd Cast Out. And I don't know that I would hate only 1 Commit to Memory. And that's assuming you even need the one that, in the first place. And, like, what if you only played 3 Glimmer of Genius and you had a Hieroglyphic Illumination in there instead of the 4th?
So, to be fair, I'm talking, just from experience sake, I'm talking about approach decks rather than Teferi decks in terms of experience. But I played both 1 and 2 commits. I played 0 commits. This is a 4 Torrential Gearhulk deck. I think this deck gets more mileage out of the 2nd Commit to Memory than the vast majority of decks that are of this model, right? Like, two Torrential Gearhulk decks don't get nearly the mileage out of Commit to Memory that 4 Torrential Gearhulk decks would.
Yeah, but, like, I mean, it depends on what you're comparing it to, right? Like, because it's not like Blink of an Eye is, like, very bad on your Torrential Gearhulk. Use it on your Torrential Gearhulk. Buy it back.
Oh, yeah, I think that the interplay between Cast Out, Commit to Memory, Blink of an Eye, and to a lesser degree Settle the Wreckage on 4 is pretty interesting. Like, those cards are all semi-interchangeable with each other, right? Like, they cost about the same amount of mana,
well,
or they don't, right? But they can, or sometimes Cast Out does, sometimes it doesn't, right? Sometimes Blink of an Eye does, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes Commit does, sometimes it doesn't. But they all cost about 4. I mean, I guess Settle always costs 4. And then they deal with, they're all this thing that can deal with a permanent that's coming at you at instant speed. And I think, like, in that sense, the deck is hyper redundant. But like you said before, there are other options that you can do with Blink of an Eye. Like, you could just tap out for Teferi and then have Blink of an Eye. Like, there's so many 2s that you can defend either yourself or your Teferi with here.
I'm just saying, okay, if you've got, like, Seal Away or Cast Out, it's kind of nice being able to just use them as removal spells early on, and then you can just Blink of an Eye on your opponent's end step, bouncing your own Seal Away or Cast Out, and then when you sweep the board on your turn, you still just have the extra Cast Out or Seal Away in your hand because of bouncing it, and their creature's dead anyway.
Oh yeah, that's an awesome combination. Absolutely. So, I mean, that makes me want to play so many more copies of Blink of an Eye than just 2.
Right, which is part of the reason why I was looking at these Commit to Memories. I'm not saying that the Commit to Memories are bad. I'm just saying that there are a lot of different incentives to prioritize Blink of an Eye in this color combination specifically.
Yeah, I think this, like I said, this deck is going to be fun to tune. And Rudy's sideboard is really, really interesting, right? Like, I love the fact that he's starting out as this kind of very instance-based control deck. But, I mean, he does have some, in Teferi here of Dominaria, he has some sort of fortress elements, but he can just go completely in the other direction, just be like, I'm playing the permanence game in a sideboarded game, right? Like Ixalan's Binding, Cast Out, Lyra Dawnbringer, Karn, right? Like, what kind of curve is that? Where you're maybe, turn 1 cycle, turn 2 Seal Away or Essence Scatter or Blink their threat, turn 3 disallow to buy time. Then you're already there. You're like Karn, Lyra or Teferi, Torrential Gearhulk. It's just permanent. If you play 1-for-1 with them in the first 1 to 4 turns of the game, they're just going to be so far behind the quality of the permanents that you're playing. And they're not going to. I mean, how hard? Like the Karn or the Lyra or the Gearhulk or the Teferi could all be better than any permanent in the opponent's deck. in some matchups. That's so cool.
What do you think of the idea of splitting Lyra Dawnbringer with Regal Caracal? Or are you just all Lyra Dawnbringer all the time? Right, because like if your opponent's already like, oh, your deck has Torrential Gearhulk and Teferi, man, I want to use all these Vraska's Contempts. And then you board in Dawnbringer and you're like, oh, I guess that's okay, I guess. But like if you have Regal Caracal as like part of the range, now you've just got them like kind of forked, right? Like the cards that are good against the Caracal are not the cards that are good against Dawnbringer.
Yeah, actually, in fact, the Dawnbringer doubles down on the cards that are good against the other cards in this deck. So, for example, Vraska's Contempt is good against either Lyra Dawnbringer or Karn, or Teferi. So maybe diversifying with the Caracal makes sense. I'm kind of not sure because the Caracal's an excellent card. Has been an excellent card, especially defensively. I don't know. Is there some reason we would want a legendary card? Not particular. I mean, there is, but not really. Not in this context. I don't think that Lyra Dawnbringer's being a legend is going to be that much of a draw compared to Regal Caracal. And there's no extra angel type stuff here, right? Like, that's a legend.
No. There's none of that stuff. Yeah, there's none of that stuff. There is another question I have though. Forsake the Worldly. The 2 and a white instant exile target artifact or enchantment with cycling of 2. What do you think of the choice of using Forsake the Worldly instead of Invoke the Divine, which is the new one in Dominaria, 2 and a white instant, destroy target artifact or enchantment, you gain 4 life?
I mean, it's obviously there for the cycle. Well, 2 things, right? It's cycling and the exile. Exile is useful against cards like Torrential Gearhulk or any situation where maybe you're up against a Torrential Gearhulk plus the Scarab God, right? Forsake the Worldly is better in that situation. I do like gaining the 4 life. I'm not sure how good this deck is against aggro, but then again, am I going to have... Actually, yeah, the red-black deck is very artifacts heavy, so maybe gaining...
Scrappy Scrounger, there's Hardic everywhere. Even Bomat Courier can get popped sometimes.
Well, I mean, yeah, I'm just trying to think of like the red-black aggro decks are just very, very artifact heavy. So I think you might easily want to have the ability to gain 4 life there. I don't know.
I like the gain 4 life personally. Like I think Appetite for the Unnatural's been an excellent card, and this card is, even better.
So, what do you think about playing 1 cast out in the sideboard? I think that's a weird sideboard choice.
Me too.
Okay.
I think the sideboarding cards that cycle for 1, it makes me raise my eyebrow, but it's not out of the question. But then when it's cast out, yeah, I don't know. I have a tough time with that one.
Like, why wasn't it in the main deck? Like, what matchup do you want to side in a cast out? If you want,
I have no doubt you would board it in a lot. I'm just suggesting it's not that high impact. But I guess I'm just reminded of how much you emphasized years ago the relative value of your sideboard slots.
Yeah, this card. I mean, I love cast out. I've played 4 cast out so many times. But if I want this effect out of my sideboard, I'm definitely going Ixalan's Binding. Right? That's the thing. And in fact, if I want a proxy for this effect, I'd almost rather have Blink of an Eye. Right? They do a very similar thing, and Blink of an Eye is so much more powerful in combination with Teferi.
What do you think of the 1 Ipnu Rivulet?
I don't know. I was thinking about that myself. Like I don't know. Like maybe you hit yourself so that you can set up Search for Iskanta. That seems terrible to me.
Well, no. So if you have 3 Teferis and 2 Commit to Memories, you have a lot of ways to put stuff on top of your opponent's deck. There's going to be times where you Teferi a key permanent, and then you Ipnu Rivulet them just to not have them definitely draw the card you can't beat.
Oh, so this is just like a memory lapse predict situation?
In a sideways way, yeah.
That's kind of cool, actually.
Right. I was actually thinking that I could stand to see a second Ipnu Rivulet in here. You want to be careful you're not taking too much damage, but I think your mana is just so easy anyway.
I mean, speaking of which, I love the 4 Field of Ruins in this deck. I just love 4 Field of Ruin in blue-white decks.
That seems reasonable.
I think this deck has a ways to go in terms of like where we're going to see some of those 1-ofs, 2-ofs, and 3-ofs solidify. But I think that this kind of take on blue-white, which is a traditional control deck with permission and removal, typical finisher being Torrential Gear Hulk, and heavy number of Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, is going to be an archetype that is here to stay for the duration of this version of Standard.
Yeah. Yep. I think this Teferi is the real deal. But it wasn't the only style of blue-white that we saw put up big finishes this weekend. This was really a great weekend for not just in blue-white, also green-white, but History of Benalia, man. So, like, for instance, one example of it in actual blue-white in blue-white was the top 32 list played by Malicious Mac at the MTGO PTQ. This is like a blue-white flash deck really capitalizing on the power of Wrath, Capuchon, Ship's Mage, in conjunction with Lyra Dawnbringer. Like if he has 4, Malicious Mac has 4 copies of Wrath, Capuchon, which lets you, it's 2 white-blue, 3/3 flying flash. You may cast historic spells as though they had flash. So you can flash down your Wrath, untap, and then on your opponent's attack step or whatever, you can flash down Lyra Dawnbringer.
This is very similar, I think, to the deck that William Heiss played to second place in the Classic last weekend. I think they're probably pretty similar. I guess Malicious Mac probably went first. This deck is really cool. It's like, I hate to put it this way, but it's almost like the return of Blue-White Flash as an aggro control archetype in Standard. Like everything centers around Wrath Capuchon, Ship's Mage. If you play this card on, at the end of your opponent's turn 4, presumably you can untap with it. It's on, right? Lyra Dawnbringer becomes something you can play. I think Walking Ballista is a historic card, right? Because artifacts are historic, right? Like the ability to make a Walking Ballista at instant speed is cool. The ability to play Teferi Hero. I mean, I don't know if you'd probably want to play Teferi as an instant because then you'd lose.
No, you're going to want to sometimes, though, right? Like, let's imagine that you're playing in a situation where your opponent's got enough board presence that your Teferi would die. You might easily, I could imagine you wanting to flash it down in your opponent's end step so that they can't attack it until you're actually untapped and can protect it with Settle the Wreckage. You're down a loyalty, you're down an activation, but at least you have all your mana. Now, there's another little interaction with Wrath Capuchon, which is History of Benalia itself is a saga which is historic. So you can actually cast History of Benalia during your opponent's attack phase to produce a surprise blocker, or you can just do it on their end step, and when you untap, you're already at Chapter 2.
Oh yeah, that's a spectacular combination, right? Like it's like almost for 3 mana getting 2/2/2s immediately, right? It's very similar in feel to that. Maybe if you did that during the opponent's end step, where you're like, all right, I'm going to end step here, History of Benalia, get a guy, then untap, get another guy. I mean, you can't attack with one of them, but it very much of that feel.
And remember, you can bounce your own History of Benalia with blink of an eye. One of the reasons I like History of Benalia so much, I think you just run 4 History of Benalias, even if you're less dedicated of a Wrath Capuchon deck. I think you can just play 4 History of Benalias in your blue-white deck because it's such a good call to herd. And then you can just blink of an eye your History of Benalia. That's like, in a weird way, it's kind of a Lingering Souls. You just pay 3 mana and you get 2 power worth of damage right up front. But then on your next turn, you get 2 more, so it's like you flash back your Lingering Souls, and then you just bounce your Blink of an Eye. Like, I think, or you use Blink of an Eye to bounce your History of Benalia. I think History of Benalia just is, like, top notch.
Oh, yeah, it's an outstanding card, and particularly outstanding here. But again, with Malicious Max deck, we have another deck with only 1 Blink of an Eye. You know, you've got to be in my camp on this, that we're going to see, 4 Blink of an Eye become standard operating procedure for a lot of decks, right? It's just
I think
too good to play. I think it's just that these decks are new, and we don't know which cards to play in which combinations yet. Because I just think Blink of an Eye is just unreal.
Yeah, me too. What about the 4 Wizards Retorts, which is another part of the payoff for playing with Wrath Capuchon, and in this case, Merfolk Trickster is another creature, another wizard that's being used to help support these Wizards Retorts.
Yeah, absolutely, it makes plenty of sense. It's just solid.
I'm not sure I'm a believer yet, just because it's okay. The floor is pretty high. I mean, it's not like it's like, okay, instead of a disallow, you have the option to save a little bit of mana sometimes. But I'm not sold on wanting to play the Merfolk Tricksters anyway, and I'm not sure the Wizard's Retort is really adding enough in this deck to be worth it. The one big advantage, though, the one thing I will say is if you go turn 4, end step, flash down Wrath, then untap and drop to Fairy, that is a great time for your counterspell to cost 2 instead of 3.
You are doing it. I think that's probably one of the play patterns that got Malicious Mac excited when he was drawing the deck up. But separately from that, just imagine that the deck wants something in that slot, right? You said it could be a disallow, it could be whatever, a hard counter. You're often willing to pay 3 mana for. It's just upside here. If you get it, you get it. If you get it in the combination of Wrath Capuchon, Ship's Mage into Teferi, into Wizard's Retort, it's like, Magical Christmas Land lottery winner. But you're still going to have other cool things, right? Just like Merfolk Trickster into what's going to be fine sometimes. Think about the turn 4 situations where you can like seal away in Wizard's Retort in the same breath. I think that's probably going to be pretty cool.
Dude, what do you think of Merfolk Trickster for winning the Lyra Dawnbringer head-to-heads?
Because you can tap their Lyra Dawnbringer?
No, you get rid of First Strike and Flying and Lifelink and all that. You wait till they're in combat, and then in the middle of combat, you're like, ha-ha! It's a trick.
Oh, well, that's probably going to be pretty important. Lyra Dawnbringer is going to be pretty important, right? Like, this card is going to be all over green, white, blue, white.
Yeah, I think Lyra Dawnbringer was like the second biggest card of the weekend. Very close second, too. But before moving to that first place card, what do you think of 2 extra Teferis in the sideboard of William Heiss's second place deck? Like, man, 2+2. And Malicious Max still had 2+1. So it's not like he's like short on him.
I mean, maybe 2+2 is the right number, and Malicious Max just couldn't even get the fourth one yet, right? Who knows? Like, these cards are all brand new. I think like it's pretty exciting. Imagine you're playing against another deck that has permission or control elements. The ability to just play and stick it to Teferi is probably going to put you in a huge position, because if nothing else, Teferi's +1 ability is such a compelling, just card advantage ability. So, people are they're gonna want to counter it, or they're gonna want to cast it out, or etc. So, just having more maybe that's the best card, right? Like, that is the card that you want when you're playing against another blue-white deck. I mean, certainly Rudy's deck seemed to indicate that this was a transformative addition to the format. If it's that big,
just dropping Sorceress Spyglass and just shutting off their Teferis, it's kind of interesting. What do you think of the possibility of Forsake the Worldly's exile ability? I'm thinking about it more, and I'm not even so sure that it's like worth it for Scrap Heap Scrounger. We already have so much like seal away type of action,
I mean, like, maybe there's matchups where like you just really want to have that. Maybe it's more about maybe it's more about the Scarab God than it is about Scrap Heap Scrounger. I don't know. You also maybe want to have just like redundancy on stuff. Like maybe you need to fight a Heart of Kiran, and a Seal Away might not be a great answer to a Heart of Kiran.
Yeah, but I'm not talking about cutting Seal Away or adding Seal Away. I'm just saying that we already have these Seal Aways. I'm saying that instead of Forsake the Worldly, we could also just be gaining 4 life by invoking the Divine.
I think you might be right. I think that, we're talking about week 1 decks. Some of these ideas are fantastic, but...
Well, no, for sure. I just like understanding the pros and cons to each. Like, I want to make sure that I know the stuff we're going to be exiling besides just the... Like, for instance, is anybody using any kind of recursion for, like, get back historic cards? Like, there's a couple of those cards in this set.
I mean, Commit to Memory is kind of a recursion thing.
I guess.
Can Malicious Mac deck... I mean, this deck can morph into a much more of a control deck, can't it? Like it's like such a different feel in game 1 relative to Rudy's deck, but it can kind of take out a lot of tricksters and put in a lot of negates and kind of. But it can't control as hard as Rudy's, I think, after sideboarding. Rudy really is just all Karn all the time.
Well, Lyra Dawnbringer definitely had a fantastic weekend and has already really proven itself to be a hit. It may be very unsurprising to see Lyra Dawnbringer doing well, but it's even less surprising, I guess, to see Llanowar Elves crushing. What a great weekend for Llanowar Elves, including actually taking down the Mitgo PTQ with one of the many green-white decks to do really well this weekend.
Yeah, I love this green-white deck. It's so diverse. This deck is like so... I mean, I hate to put it this way, but I also love to put it this way. This is like such a lightsaber deck.
Oh, God.
No?
You do not hate to put it that way.
It's really Baneslayer Angels and Noble Hierarchs here, right? Like, I think this... I mean, Shauna Sisse's legacy is...
we have a word for that. It's not lightsaber. It's much more like Ruben Zoo.
Ruben's... I can accept that. We'll go with Ruben Zoo. But let me tell you something. Ruben Zoo didn't have Ajani, and this deck does. This deck's got 3 Ajanis in that.
It had Elspeth.
Karn Scion of Urza section. All right, I can accept you. This deck is fantastic. It's interesting to me how this deck, because it's different. Like if you look at the red-black decks versus this deck's like, just play a bunch of artifacts. Let's play Walking Ballista, Aethersphere Harvester, Treasure Map, and then
I love Treasure Map.
Just get a slight payoff on the Karn, but depending on your sequencing, that Treasure Map into Karn might be insane.
Dude, Treasure Map with Merfolk Branchwalker? Yeah?
Well, yeah, they are friends. They're friends however direction you want to go. I mean,
right.
Llanowar Elves into Treasure Map. You're like, turn 1 Llanowar Elves, turn 2 map, use the map!
Yes. What about dude, Merfolk Branchwalkers 5 through 8. Your 3-drop one. That's
Jade
just
Light Ranger.
Yes, Jade Light. I was thinking of Jade Leech over and over again. We had a conversation at the office today about the glory of Jade Leech days, but Jade Light Ranger I think is an even stronger Magic the Gathering card.
But yeah, where is Merfolk Branchwalker's big brother here?
I really think that you like when you have Llanowar Elves too, so you're just like Llanowar Elf into the Jade Light Ranger. That's just so sick.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I'd probably rather have it than Aethersphere Harvester in the main deck, but maybe I'm wrong. I mean, Aethersphere Harvester does have great synergy with Karn. It gives you I guess both cards are outstanding against red aggro. Like, absolutely outstanding. I mean, Aethersphere Harvester isn't game over because of a braid, but it's, obviously does a lot of work. But so does Jade Light Ranger. Jailer Ranger is an awesome stop sign.
Yeah. I love thrashing Bronodon, by the way, in the new format. I just think that there's so much more incentive for people to be playing either white enchantments or vehicles. And I think that the Bronodon, it's like a real nice 3/4 anyway. And you even have like Llanowar Elves to power it out fast. Like if you drop a Bronodon on turn 2, you're kind of actually giving your opponent a hard time.
Oh yeah, the 4th toughness is a huge deal, and that ability is so flexible on this body for this casting cost. Like it's weird because the card is clearly not overpowered, but it's just
it's clearly not overpowered. I don't think it's overpowered, but I don't know that it's clear. It's a 3/4 for 3 that gives you a Kasali Pride Mage trigger.
Yes, I once stated that a 3/3 for 3 was the best card in the format, so this card is quite better than that.
Yeah, you're prone to hyperbole, though.
Yeah, well, I still said it. And and this card is
touché.
Well, on the other hand, this card will not trigger any of your spirit, your spirit stuff, but it might trigger dinosaur stuff. Anyway, this deck is sweet. I think that this deck is like, it's real interesting to me because you can theoretically play the cast outs in this deck, but Team 5C just didn't.
No. Actually, see, I don't hate not playing cast out here. I think that when you're playing a curve deck, this is a deck that is already, it's going to have to pick its spots to play the Scattered Groves anyway. And, you're playing Llanowar Elves on one. Like, when are you going to want to cycle cast out? Like, it's not like you want to use your Aether Hub, right? And your white mana comes into play tapped on turn 1 so often. And you're not going to want to cycle cast out on turn 2. You're going to want to play a 2-drop. And you're not going to want to cycle cast out on turn 3. You're going to want to play a 3-drop. There's no way I want to play cast out in this deck. I just want to play Ixalan's Binding, if nothing else. I want to play. So I don't know about Seal Away. It could be good because you might just need the speed, but I would definitely not play cast out.
Yeah, I could say the Binding's quite good here.
The Binding I think is just. I would play cast out if Binding wasn't so good.
Well, Binding gets better because you have Llanowar Elves, right? Like,
oh yeah.
So, I like the triple Lifecrafters bestiary in the sideboard. I think we kind of forgot about that guy for a while. And this deck has got 24 creatures, most of them really good. And so you just play that's the other thing. Because you have Llanowar Elves, your ability to play Lifecrafters bestiary on turn 2 is real significant. And you're going to have spare green mana because of Llanowar Elves. Like you can just play the most beautiful grindy game if you wanted to.
Oh yeah, this deck is so good for grinding, right? Like Merfolk Branchwalker, the Karn Cyanoverza, the treasure maps, and then out of the sideboard, 3 Lifecrafters Bestiary, 3 Nissa Vital Force. You're just drawing so many cards for a green-white creature deck.
Yeah, I think this strategy is going to be a keeper also. I think that the challenges that we're going to see for this strategy are going to be getting those Jadelight Rangers in, because just on a fundamental, I feel like Jadelight Ranger is, you just want to be there, right? You agree with that, right, Patrick?
Yeah. I think Jadelight Ranger is just really efficient.
And then also, I probably have the expectation that we'll see a further emphasis on Shalai, Voice of Plenty. One of the things that is great about Shalai, which we never talked about previously, obviously Shalai into Lyra Dawnbringer is the Mondo combo, defensively and everything. But Shalai with the +1/+1 counter ability, imagine you have a Walking Ballista and you have a Shalai. You could just overspend, the GG4 instead of just 4 to put +1/+1 counter. You put +1/+1 counter on everything, not just the Walking Ballista, and then you get all those other benefits.
Well, and it's particularly nice when you have a Rishkar Pima Renegade. Oh, because now every single one of your Merfolk Branchwalkers is making mana. Your Shanna Sissy's Legacy is making mana. And actually, speaking of Shanasis's legacy, this is we see a lot of Keldon warlords, and the ones that cost 3 are often fringe, and the ones that cost 4 are like not that good. But 2 mana? Voice of Resurgence is like the only 2 mana one we ever wrote. Like, Shanasis's legacy's, ability to just come down and be basically at least a 2/2 when it's attacking on turn 3. But over the course of the game, potentially to become much larger, that's a lot out of your 2-drop, and its ability is not 0.
Wait, so
its other ability. So the stuff that gets stopped, the most notable are Planeswalkers, like opposing Chandra ability or Teferi's ability. All the Planeswalker abilities are real nice to be not able to be targeted by. And then it also, Shanna can't be hit by a Glorybringer, which it's kind of nice as the game stretches, drags on. And I just think that having the ability to dodge some amount of interaction, and it's also Walking Ballista is the other big one.
What's the difference between this ability and hexproof?
It's hexproof stops spells.
Oh, so it's spells or abilities.
Hexproof is Shanna is only can't be the target of abilities your opponent controls. So Shanna could die to, like, say, a lightning strike. Whereas if something is hexproof, it can't be the target of spells or abilities. This one, it just can't be the target of abilities. So no icy manipulators, no basically any kind of activated ability.
But a fatal
no royal assassins.
A fatal push will still be fatal, no matter how big Shanna gets.
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I think that Shanna is. I think Shanna is probably good. Maybe I think if I were building this deck from the ground up, I'd play 1, not 3.
I don't know, man. Dude, I think you should. I mean, it's even better if you play a more tokens deck. This version isn't pushing Shanna that much, but I actually am not convinced that you don't want to just be making some concessions because of Shanna. Like, for instance, the top 16 list that Gershi used is an actual, like, more dedicated tokens deck. It still has some Brontodon, Lyra Dawnbringer action. But the ability to, and he doesn't even use, they didn't even use Shanna at all. But I can't help but wonder if you're using all the token making, maybe that's like, I don't know, maybe that's a good fit with Shanna.
Oh, okay. I mean, this is completely different, right? So obviously the token making in Shanna is. Well, but he didn't even. But they didn't.
Gershi didn't even use Shanna.
Yeah, I think that probably Shanna should be in a deck like this, right? Like, Shram's expertise into Shanna seems pretty powerful to me, right? Like 4 mana, sure. Like the 7 power for 4 mana. That seems pretty good.
I do like the Saproling Migration, though. Saproling Migration. Like, how many times have we seen 2-cost make 2 1/1s show up? Plenty, right?
Yeah.
But the kicker option is like, it's like a great, like, it's like in a way it's another Lingering Soul sometimes. Like, it's just like a pretty reasonable amount of value, and it's a way to make it so that you're not going to flood out as easily. Like, if you have a bunch of mana, if you draw too much, you can kick your migration for extra value. And if you don't draw enough, well, you've got extra cheap token making. And it's particularly nice with Shalai, Voice of Plenty. Like, Shalai being able to anthem all 4 tokens at the same time. That's great. And what's more, Growing Rights of Itlimoc is super cool with Saproling Migration. Saproling Migration by itself is enough to flip the Growing Rights of Itlimoc. And if you flip Growing Rites of Itlamok, you'll have enough extra mana laying around that you're going to love every random way you have to put that extra mana to use. Obviously it's nice being able to just go bonkers with your Walking Ballista or pumping Shalai over and over and over again. But you want to have some other ways that you can take advantage of that mana too.
What do you think about the Saproling Migration as a 4-of relative to only 2 copies of Angel of Invention? Like, how rich must green-white be that this is a dilemma that can come up, right? That this archetype was a winner already in the format prior to Dominaria joining up, and previously it was a 4 Angel of Invention universe for them. So what do you think about that?
I don't think it's really the Saproling Migration that's taking away Angel of Invention slots as much as it's the Lyra Dawnbringers.
Yeah, those cards are so different. Despite the fact that they're both 5 casting cost angels, right? I think they're
but you only have so much. You only have so much room for 5-drops, man.
Yeah,
right?
I hear you. But Saproling Migration is a 6.
Shalai is so Saproling Migration. It's nice to kick for 6 sometimes, but you want to play it as a 2. It's not like this deck's super long on 2s. I mean, maybe it'd be different if you had Shanna in here.
Yeah, I think I might like this version even better. I do think that with the heavy token emphasis that might want to give some consideration to Shanna instead of 0 copies. And I think that the other version, I think 3 copies is too many. That's my take on these splits. One card I just want to shout out to, Ajani Unyielding. There's a 1-of in Gershi's sideboard. That card is much better than I think people give it credit for, depending on how the opponent plays, right? Like, green-white decks, I think, in general, are probably they're prey to certain types of control decks, but Ajani Unyielding can nuke the Scarab God dead. Oh, okay, no, that could be okay. It's hard to play too many 6s, but yeah, but
one of those could add a lot of dimension to your deck, particularly if you had some way to find it, like these, I guess, Oath of Nissa, Part 2, Adventurous Impulse. Now, I didn't see green-white using it, and they're not going to get as much out of it because of how many sorceries they play. But green-black Constrictor, this is a potential home for it, right? Like, when you don't have that many 1-drops besides Llanowar Elves, like Easy's top 8 list from the PTQ was a black-green Constrictor deck where the only 1-drops were Llanowar Elves and Adventurous Impulse, besides, playing a tap, and it's not like the enemy color deck lands even come into play tap very often. It's mostly just lots of 2-drops, some Jade Light Rangers, and then a little bit of removal. I feel like this deck is taking pretty good advantage of Ravenous Chupacabra too.
Oh yeah, that's a card that we were talking about being a little bit missing previously from the format. I think Adventurous Impulse is a pretty cool card, right? So
it sweetens the pot for playing Ravenous Chupacabras, right? Like, it makes it so that your removal spell is one of the things you can go get.
Yeah, one of the things I like about this card is that exactly what you were saying, that you can get a card like Ravenous Chupacabra. But it also it is more lands in the early game and more spells in not the early game, right? Like, if you need a second land, Adventurous Impulse can really help you out there. And then if you have plenty of land later, then you can go get whatever creature is there, but it could get you money.
Yeah, it looks like just a nice way to improve your consistency. Yeah,
I like it. So this deck is essentially a 26-ish land deck, even though it's a 23 physical lands.
Yeah, and that it makes a lot of sense that you would play a 7 forest 2 swamp split, just in terms of, I mean, obviously there's the Ifnir Deadlands too, but like being heavy on the green makes a lot of sense because of how much Adventurous Impulse can help you find your black. But if you don't have the green to get started, it's not like the Adventurous Impulse helps you find your first green.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, obviously there's a prerequisite there. One thing that I'm a little curious about, and I guess having 4 copies of Ravenous Chupacabra really puts you in a different zone with regards to how many slots you're going to leave open for Vraska's Contempt and Fatal Push. But given the complexion of the format, wouldn't you play the other 2 Vraska's Contempt somewhere?
Probably. I'm a big fan of Vraska's Contempt. In fact, the green-black Constrictor deck, also using Adventurous Impulse, but the green-black Constrictor deck that Charles Porges won the Classic with featured a full 4 Vraska's Contempt's main deck.
Yep. I mean, this is quite a different deck. He's got 3 copies of Karn's Urza.
That's like the only difference, right? Is he has Vraska's Contempt instead of so many He's got Vraska's Contempts and Karns instead of so many Chupacabras.
And he's got a 24th land and only 3 copies of Adventurous Impulse, but
that doesn't make it a new archetype.
No, it's not a different archetype.
Dude, Phyrexian Scriptures? Yeah,
I like Phyrexian Scriptures. I think that card is. It's weird to say this because there's only really been one weekend of events, but I think that card is kind of underrated still.
Dude, I want to play Phyrexian Scriptures in some sort of a red-black deck.
Yeah.
With like Bomat Courier, Scrap Heap Scrounger, some vehicles. Really take advantage of that Plague Wind type of ability.
Let's talk about some of these red-black decks, which I thought that were pretty exciting from the team event. Several red-black decks did great. Top 8, top 4 type finishes.
Oh yeah, I had a feeling you were gonna like these.
I find this distinction between red-black aggro and red-black vehicles quite dubious.
I don't know what the difference is between those two.
Well, the red-black aggro decks have 3 Aethersphere Harvesters, and the red-black vehicles deck has 2 Aethersphere Harvesters and 2 Heart of Kirin. Like that is not a new archetype.
Yeah, well, here's where I draw the line. Is your deck built? Does your red aggro deck have God Pharaoh's Gift and Gate to the Afterlife? Because that's a different archetype than not having those cards.
Oh yeah, that is a very different archetype. But it's interesting. Like they've got some decks have got Karn, some decks have got Chandra. That's cool. But man, this deck, red black aggro, red black vehicles, whichever one you want to call it, it's so cool. Bomat Courier, Scrap Heap Scrounger. I mean, I think I would like 4 copies of Walking Ballista. Some versions only have 2. So many high value artifacts before you even get to the artifacts part of the deck, right? Just in the creature part, synergy with Karn. It makes Inventor's Apprentice so good, and of course,
no. Oh, okay, go ahead.
The payoff, Unlicensed Disintegration. That's where the payoff is.
I'm just saying, I want to do you one better. Obviously, you want to play 4 Unlicensed Disintegration. I'm just saying, instead of 4 Inventor's Apprentice, can we get 4 Toolcraft Exemplar in here? Because not only is Toolcraft Exemplar a messed up Magic card, I want to play 4 copies of History of Benalia. I'm telling you.
In red black?
In Mardu vehicles, 4 copies of History of Benalia. It's like if you could play with Gideon, except it's legal. It's like Gideon, ally of Zendikar. Make a 2/2, make a 2/2, and then you just attack for 1,000,000. Like, you know how Gideon's like make a 2/2, and then like you eventually start attacking with the 5/5? History of Benalia, man. I want to just be like turn 1 Toolcraft Exemplar, turn 2, Heart of Kirin or Scrap Heap Scrounger, Walking Ballista, whatever. Turn 3, History of Benalia. And then turn 4, you can do whatever you want. Like, for instance, obviously Unlicensed Disintegration, great turn 4 play, even if it costs 3. Great turn 4 play. But Karn Scion of Urza takes on new meaning as your 4. If your deck has Bomat Courier, Scrap Heap Scrounger, Walking Ballista, maybe a Heart of Kirin, maybe Aethersphere Harvester, maybe Pia Nalar, Dude, this is a deck that Karn's -2 ability is going to put in some work.
Oh my god, Heart of Kieran Karn is... Oh,
Yes!
That's filthy!
Yes. Yes, there's
So
a lot to like there. I'm saying Mardu vehicles, baby. Mardu vehicles.
So, man, what a loser has Hazoret become in this format for the most unstoppable card, right? Like,
well, just look at how many decks we've been looking at that are just all cast outs and sealaways and
even
Vraska's
Blink of an Eye,
Contempts, Blink of an Eye, all that.
The worst is if like you just sculpt your turn for the big attack and then they blink the other guy and then you can't attack with Hazoret. It's
just make sure you don't block their Hazoret with your Lyra Dawnbringer.
Yeah, that's not going to work out the way that you think it's going to work out, right? You're going to.
Well, it'll work out the way I think it's going to work out the way I think it's going to work out.
Yeah, well, it's first strike is not indestructible.
So Anicia top 32'd with a Mardu Vehicles deck that had a piece of sideboard technology that I think you could appreciate. A little fungal infection. 1 cost. Target creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn. Create a 1/1 green Saproling creature token.
That card is really cool.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Imagine if you just play a fungal infection on their turn 1 Bomat Courier.
Or Llanowar Elf, or Earthshaker Kenra. Like, this is all
you're doing it. That is a great way to spend 1 mana.
Like, the best, I think, is if they're, like, first turn, whatever, like Bomat Courier in, and, like, second turn, Earthshaker Kenra attack with both. They're tapped out. You fungal infection the Bomat Courier. It dies, and you block the Earthshaker Kenra after the trigger's gone in the stack.
Mm-hmm.
That is disgusting. Sign me up for 4 fungal infections. Also, not for nothing, but this is a card that trades 1 for 1, potentially with one of the opponent's permanents, but then also gives you a bonus permanent. So if you were in the market for generating, let's say, 10 permanents, it would be helpful.
Well, and the Saproling can give you a way to crew your Aethersphere Harvester by surprise. Like, if you have no creatures in play, just an Aethersphere Harvester, and your opponent attacks you, you can, like, kill one attacker and then use the Saproling to crew the Aethersphere Harvester and then surprise block the other one.
Or what if you didn't kill the attacker, right? You just made it small enough so that the Aethersphere Harvester... It doesn't really matter. Aethersphere Harvester is probably big enough to beat it up. And then you could crew it and then combat, gain some life. That's a thing, too. You don't have to kill, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this card is cool. I think people should play more fungal infections.
Yeah. No, I thought... it seemed like you're kind of tech. Like, it's just so mana efficient, and sometimes that's, like, the best thing you could ask for out of your sideboard.
Yeah, like, it's... Interaction with a Rekindling Phoenix, for example, is pretty interesting, right? Because like it's not a permanent solution necessarily, but you can kind of maybe push a Rekindling Phoenix down the stairs with this, right? Like you trade and then kill the 0/1, get a little something out of it.
Yeah, you can also kill people's Combat Celebrants. And Combat Celebrant was back in a big way this weekend thanks to the resurgence of God Pharaoh's gift decks, most commonly in the form of the red aggro style of God Pharaoh's gift deck that you were espousing the virtues of a couple weeks ago. Like, there's a bunch of these, mono red, red blue, I think red black. I think that the addition of Skirk Prospector, Siege Gang Commander, and Goblin Chain Whirler is really making for some interesting new quasi-Goblin deck, but mostly just God Pharaoh's Gift Gate to the Afterlife decks.
Oh yeah, the Skirk Prospector is so cool because it can set you up to get whatever stuff you want out, right? But then it also can set up your God Pharaoh's Gift aspect of your deck, right? Like you can just kind of like immediately upgrade some aspect. Like for example, upgrading a Siege Gang Commander that you already had in play that might be an exciting thing to do.
Mm-hmm. And even if you don't have anything like it, if you don't have something in your graveyard, the ability to sacrifice your Siege Gang commander so that you can get it back immediately with the God Pharaoh's gift is very enticing. And you just get to fill your graveyard so fast. If you have a Gate to the Afterlife and a Skirk Prospector, like sacrificing a goblin is one creature to the graveyard. You get to loot for the Gate to the Afterlife, which is another card, so that like you're actually, for -1 mana, getting to put 2 creatures in the graveyard.
Or depending on how the opponent is choosing to defend themselves, like what if you had a Skirk Prospector and then sacrificed a Goblin Chain Whirler, right? Like that card coming back as a great trigger, you're upgrading its size. What if they were like, all right, I have an army of defenders? Not for long, you don't. So
yeah, and the Chain Whirler is a pretty dope card in its own right. Right? Like if you're just dropping the Chain Whirler and hitting all these sap-rolling migration tokens or the various Bomac Courier Walking Ballista types, I mean, the Chain Whirler is just an amazing card anyway.
Oh, yeah. I said before that I didn't think that Thrashing Brontodon was, grossly overpowered at 3. I think Goblin Chain Whirler might make you think twice about that.
What do you think of the use of Fight with Fire as a sort of new niche red option, particularly for when you want to get extra edge against Lyra Dawnbringer?
I think that's exactly where you want it, right? So red doesn't have a lot of great options to deal with a 5 toughness creature. Fight with Fire for 2 in a red is basically kind of like a red Dark Banishing for Lyra Dawnbringer, or smaller creatures than that. But then you also have the kicker ability, right? That obviously doesn't come up as much. Like that's quite a bit of mana. That's 6-9 total to do the kicker. But I think
no. But you have Skirk Prospector. So if you just untap with Siege Gang Commander and Skirk Prospector in play, you can really actually do it.
All right.
You just sack all your goblins, and then you're like.
I've seen Fight with Fire described as the new red roast, but unlike regular roast, you can hit the card you actually want.
Well, it's also an Urza's Rage, right? I mean,
yeah.
I guess you're going to do 5 to creatures, but I want to go to the face.
Well, it can maybe do that for you. Like I think that this format is so interesting. Like it's completely unclear to me what the best version of these decks that are in clustered families might be. Like mono red, red black aggro, or call it red black vehicles. You're saying Mardu
vehicles,
and that's without even thinking about the God Pharaoh's gift decks, right? Which are sharing so many of the same cards. Meanwhile, on the other end of the poles of this format are crazy. Like the green-white decks are so different from one another. And the blue-white decks, I mean, there's still approach decks. There's this flash deck. There's this,
Dude, and we didn't even touch on the Steel Leaf Champion decks or the Banalish Marshall decks. There's some mono white decks or white splash black and some mono green decks or splash whatever color taking advantage of this 5/4 for 3 with, better than Woolly Thoctor with upside, or the 3/3 Anthem everything for 3. There's some sick things out there.
Do you want to talk about maybe Yeoman 5's white black tokens deck? Where do you want to go?
Sure.
So if we're just talking about white black tokens, that's the name of an archetype that a lot of us have been familiar with for months. And if I said, all right, I'm going to play a white black tokens deck with Dominaria, it looks nothing like the Anointed Procession decks that we saw before. This deck is a punching machine, right? History of Benalia, Legion's Landing, Servo Exhibition. SRAM's expertise into History of Benalia seems insane to me. SRAM's expertise into Banalish Marshall. All kinds of sauce here.
Yeah, that interaction is just SRAM's expertise. Wow, did it gain some some awesomeness because of Dominaria. But if you just SRAM's Expertise and put a Banalish Marshal down, that's a huge tempo play. But what's more, if you can play 4 Servos Exhibition and 4 SRAM's Expertise, you're well on your way to actually supporting Toolcraft Exemplar, even in a white-black tokens deck. And here we see Scrap Heap Scrounger helping round it out. And then Pride of the Conquerors getting extra Ascend action because of how much History of Benalia can help get you up there.
What do you think about Scrap Heap Scrounger in this deck? Is it worth the splash?
Sure, why not?
You think the splash is basically free?
I think the splash is so close to free. And I think that Scrap Heap Scrounger powering up Toolcraft Exemplar is a really big game. And I think that Scrap Heap Scrounger providing just a little bit of extra protection against Fumigate is like just what the doctor ordered. So I'm a big fan of Scrap Heap Scrounger in this deck.
Yeah, he didn't even play the 4th Isolated Chapel. That's how free Scrap Heap Scrounger is.
Yeah, I don't even know that you play the 3rd. You can if you want. I would start with the 3 and then just see where it goes from there. But he's even playing a Grasping Dunes. So, like, that's a statement about the consistency of the mana. It's also possible to go a little harder on the white-black token stuff, or a little bigger, I should say, and maybe use some Planeswalkers. You know, like Gideon of the Trials, Karn, Cyan, and Verza. Dude, I don't even know that it's out of the question to splash Teferi. Is that crazy?
It's out of what I would have considered. I mean, I would have gone way, way different Planeswalker selection before I considered Teferi. I mean, I would consider Karn before Teferi, for example. Like, the deck already has Scrap Heap Scrounger, Sky Sovereign.
Well, all the servos, all the white ones.
All those cards. Like, I'd go Karn before I went Teferi. You know, especially since Karn is just a value engine already.
Dude, Gideon of the Trials is a great thing to follow SRAM Expertise up with.
I agree, and I actually think that based on the success of the green-white decks and the viability of this black-white, this is really like a white swarm deck more than a black-white tokens deck.
Totally.
Like I don't know. I wonder, is it time for Approach of the Second Sun? Is that the time that works? Like,
well, yes, insofar as it's time for Lich's Mastery.
Oh yeah, where are the Mastery decks?
Dude, we got to invent them.
Haven't seen it yet. All right.
Next week, man. Next week.
But this is unbelievably exciting as a start to the format.
Oh yeah. Oh, definitely.
So many possibilities.
Yeah, and I don't think we've even seen remote. Setting aside all the Lich's Mastery type, what have yous. I mean, Board the Weatherlight, Daring Archaeologist, the potential for History of Benalia in a much wider selection of decks, a little bit more night action. Urza's Ruinous Blast put up some finishes. A little bit more dedicated Wizard aggro could be in the mix. I think we could see some Squee the Immortals.
Yeah?
I actually think Squee the Immortals. And then Gaia's Blessing.
Is there a possibility of an infinite combo with Squee and Skirk Prospector in Standard?
I don't think so. Maybe.
What's the name What's the name of that 2/2 bird for 4 that gets things back?
Yeah, you're at a whole nother level than that I'm familiar with. But dude, I could see Song of Freylies. By the way, Song of Freylies. If you make everything like make everything indestructible and then sweep the board. That move like the green-white decks and the Bant decks used to do a couple formats ago. And then the possibility of playing Muldrotha or Oath of Teferi.
Oh, man. Muldrotha that's going to be a card that's going to come out. I think Jade Light
Mox
Ranger.
Amber. Oh, keep going. Sorry.
I'm just saying Jade Light Ranger, Merfolk Branchwalker. Those guys are going to be. And I mean, we can adopt like a lot of the +1/+1 counter action from the green white deck, and then just go Muldrotha at the top end instead of Lyra Dawnbringer. I don't know if that's better. Lyra Dawnbringer is so good, and the green white decks are so slick. Maybe it's a crazy idea, but I mean, Muldrotha, if you untap with it and you have it in a deck that's built to be Muldrotha's home, I mean, I feel like you're just going to draw 3 cards a turn, right? Like, isn't that?
Yeah.
Like, that's just how it's going to work, right?
I think so. And dude, we didn't even see like mono black yet, like Demon Lord Belsnillock or Dreadshade or
Dreadshade.
Yeah. And what about your blue decks? You know, like where are the Syncopates at? What about the Tempest Djinns?
People, they just don't know yet. They don't know.
Dude, this set is amazing.
Yeah, this is. Thank you for returning to Dominaria, Richard Garfield.
So great. Tried to play dredge, it's a jailer hate. Ghostly prison waiting for my untapped phase. Your core trapped in amber stasis days. Lost a lot of friends, got left